Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Max Gorn, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Number 4 in the 50 most relevant for 2025. The players I believe we must have a conversation about this pre-season for your AFL Fantasy SuperCoach and Dream Team sides. Caleb Daniel is who is on the agenda today. There's a high balance of probability that he's already sitting in your fantasy footy side. Are we going to try to move that for you? Not sure we can, but regardless, we're going to unpack what his fantasy footy potential could be for this upcoming season. Joining me on the podcast, a man that is a regular staple of the Coaches Panel. You see him sometimes with the Fantasy Fanatics, and he's ventured out under the umbrella of the Coaches Panel as the host of a brand new Keeper and Dynasty League podcast called Finders Keepers. Already 2 episodes out, charting nicely, helping the fantasy footy community. Jordox, nice to have you back on the podcast, talking about what feels like one of the greatest gifts for fantasy coaches we're going to get in 2025.
That's right. G'day, mate. Good to be on again. Oh, geez, it's one of the ones that I was looking forward to having a chat about, in that it's going to be pretty one direction, the conversation, I think, in terms of what coaches are going to do with a Caleb Daniel this year, and trying to find any reason not to start him, just to offer the alternate view. And yeah, I've come up stumps. So I think it'll be a quick chat.
Oh, we'll try to find some potholes, but yes, no, it certainly won't be our longest one. Look, a seasonal average of 49.9 last year in SuperCoach, of 50.1 in AFL Fantasy. It has been a long time since the human helmet has been anywhere near this price point. He has $269,100 in SuperCoach, and he's just a touch over the $500,000 mark in both Dream Team and Fantasy. 15 games last year, and a top score of 107 in SuperCoach. That is a long way off what he has previously given as a career high score. It was back in 2023 against the Cats, a 169, while against the Hawks, his best game for the year. Technically, you could argue that it wasn't even really in the proper season. But anyway, it's in September. It was against the Hawks. It was a 94. He technically got it. So we're going to include it there just to make us feel slightly better about his numbers and data. But a 136 is also his career high fantasy game in that same matchup that he's got his career high SuperCoach score. It was a real bizarre year for us, Jordox. If you are looking and watching on with some interest about what the Western Bulldogs would do, because there were probably 3 staples that we had some level of confidence about that would be best 22 and have consistent roles, if not fantasy favourable roles. Bailey Smith, Jackson McRae, and Caleb Daniel. In the preseason, Bailey goes down with an ACL. Jackson finds himself up and down between the VFL and AFL system, and when he's in the AFL system, he's the best. And unfortunately, if it wasn't McRae, it felt like it was Caleb Daniel. It did feel like, whether there is a reason that fantasy communities will ever understand or not, it did feel like he fell out of favour with the Bulldogs. But at his best, Caleb's a really handy footballer at the elite level.
Yeah, I've always thought he's a great player. I mean, when he came into the comp, it was his height, and the fact that he was wearing a helmet. It's been quite impressive that he's turned into the player that he has. In terms of what happened at the Bulldogs, I mean, it's hard to really pinpoint. We like to use the phrase, he got bevoed in the fantasy community quite a lot. And, that is true. But look, this happens. Players fall out of favour with the coaching and end up being tried in different positions. And sometimes it works. I mean, if you look at Bailey Dale, he got the sub. He started with a vest earlier in the year, and then the next week went gangbusters and had a great season. So players react in different ways. I do feel for Daniel. I just feel like he was moved around. He was doing a great job off halfback. Then they put him into the middle, and then they tried him forward. End of the day, it didn't work out, but it's good news for the fantasy world because we get a guy who's great value. And, I think the most telling part about the Daniel trade was when on trade night, that last night of the deadline, when his manager was interviewed and straight away said, oh yeah, he'll be playing halfback. I think it's when the whole fantasy world just went, you ripper. If he keeps forward status, we are laughing.
Yeah, and aren't we going to need it, which we will talk about. 6 green vests last year, 1 red vest, and basically an average of 50 right across the formats. But as you alluded to, both on trade night when the move finally went down and looking back through the corridors of time, we know this about Caleb Daniel. He's on the ledges of being a premium defender for us. Now, he's mid-forward eligible in 2025, but he's been on the ledges of premium territory defensive lines for us. Like, just look at the 21, 22, and 23 fantasy football seasons across the formats, and you'll see this is where the level of excitement and anticipation is sitting in the community. 89.9, 86.7, and an 86.9 in AFL Fantasy. We are talking about nearly 40 points per game of proven upside. Not forecast, not potential, not breakout, but actuality of I have done this over 3 seasons. This is where the excitement is coming. Well, you flip over to the SuperCoach scoring platform. 92.8, 89.9, and a 93.9. Again, well and truly in these formats, we're talking 40 points per game of upside. It does get difficult for us, Jordox. I know we'll get to the ownership percentage of the role, and there are some potholes that we do need to acknowledge. But it does really feel like the community has just absolutely zeroed in on this selection, made the call of he's done it before, he's doing it in a new side, he's got the opportunity, case closed. It does feel like there's not much more to state.
Yeah, and not only has he done it in the role before, but the club he's joining has got quite a name for it, for delivering great fantasy scoring off a halfback spot. You just have to cast your minds back to Aaron Hall, Luke McDonald, Jack Siebel, Colby McKercher, Harry Sheasel. I mean, there's a long list. Even Tom Powell for a bit last year. But I guess you'd want to think for North fans that as North improve and go up the ladder, there's a little bit less ball back there. But, that's Daniel's bread and butter, and that role is sort of made for him. I guess the only thing, and really clutching at straws to try and think of where it could go wrong for those starting with Daniel is, I know 12 months ago they brought Zach Fisher across and he went into that role, but everyone was a little bit not, will he survive in that role? I think he did largely for the season, injuries aside. But I guess with Daniel's history as being someone who can go into the midfield, someone who can go forward, I guess that's my only slight concern is that at some point, round 4 or 5, North decide, actually, we've got Fisher back there, we've got McKercher back there, we might need your help in the forward line. But even at his price, he'll have made the money you need and you just jump off. So pretty low risk, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think the low risk is couched for us in a couple of areas. One you've mentioned is that price point, the fact that he's unbelievable potential value based on his proven output. I think that's one. And then the second is you're so protected by ownership. Like, he's the most owned player in SuperCoach. He's top 5 across your other formats as well. Everybody has got their hands on Caleb Daniel. And for those that don't, should he have one of the two things, A, the halfback role in the practice and community series games, and B, scores well from a fantasy perspective in those roles, well, the other 10, 20, 30% of coaches that are hauling out on it are just going to absolutely fall in line on this one, because there is a low point of risk in terms of it being the thing that kind of screws your season over a little bit. So I definitely think it's a low risk selection. It's also not a selection that if you go it, you're not going to create any separation here. This is not a separation pick. This is a value buy with the intent for it to create some cash generation and bank some points on the field for you. I think the only poking of holes I could find here is around, while Caleb is brilliant at a lot of things, and what he's really elite at is hitting kicks up on the 35-45 that are kind of those short 20 to 35, 40 metre kicks and hitting a teammate in some space and opening up the game. That's probably what his strength is, and certainly why I think North Melbourne have gone after that, because if you've mentioned, they've moved Sheasel up the ground, McKercher back, Fisher didn't work. So clearly North Melbourne are wanting some ball movement and some distribution through there. If I'm going to be really harsh on the commentary around Caleb, it's probably around two things. There's no penetration in that kick at all. And so if the team is in challenging spaces, he's going to look to take on a kick that's probably, even for anyone in the AFL, is probably a little too much, because he's just not going to just thump it out of there. That's not in his DNA. And so he may take that little bit extra to try to get rid of the ball. And he doesn't offer too much on the defensive side as well. He's very offensively minded. And if North Melbourne don't get that defensive six structure right, teams could play through him quite easily, because it's just not his strength. He is, as I've said, a really smart, high IQ footballer that uses the ball well by foot in these shorter, sharper passes. The only reason that it might see a diminishing scoring output based on our expectation is one of two things. North Melbourne want to move the ball faster and with a greater metres gained. And second, players like a McKercher, should they stay into that half-back space, just eat into some of the market share of ball.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
I don't think either of these are enough reasons, Jordox, to fade him. But these are probably the only little asterisks that we can find sitting on this selection.
And by the time, if those asterisks, that was a good one, asterisks do show themselves, by that point of the season, he'll have already gone up in cash and you just jump off. So, it's pretty safe.
Yeah, look, I'm big on taking on players in ownership. I'm big on taking calculated risks. I think that's an important part of the way we should play our fantasy game. But when you look at a player in the line that he is, where we have a low volume of top-end premiums, we do have a broad number of mid-50s, 60s, 70s options to select from. And then you look at this ownership. I don't find a compelling narrative around Caleb Daniel as a reason to fade. There are almost any other player that go, I'm picking this player over this guy for this reason. I'd go, I get it. I see why you're fading that value out. I see why you're not going that top end premium and you're choosing this other. But a player like Caleb Daniel, when you stack up his historical pedigree, the role that he has done that historical pedigree in, the team, as you've mentioned, that have shown the historical pedigree that's allowed, the price point that he sits for us, and in a line where we're crying out for options alongside the high-end ownership top 5 across the formats, it's just not someone I could advocate for you to go against. And so for me, he's not the most relevant player, but he is probably the hardest to go against in 2025. But on draft day, Jordox, there's just one of us that get our hands on him. We draft here at the Coaches Panel on the Keeper platform. It is available and ready for you to use right now. Whether you're starting a single season league, you can get in there and do that. Whether you've imported your Dynasty or Keeper league over, you can do that. Have your draft picks, customizations, everything you need for your category leagues. They are in there. Or you're starting a brand new Keeper or Dynasty league. everything that you can dream, Keeper can let you do. Got to admit, I've done a couple of drafts on Keeper. I've done way too many trades in my Keepers that I'd probably should maybe rescind some of these. It's unbelievable what Ryan and the team have done. You've got to be drafting on the Keeper platform in 2025. But where do you think he goes, Jordox? Because if you want a top-end forward, you got to go early, but sometimes you don't want to go too early. So where do you see him going on draft day?
He's a real curious one because I just don't think many are going to think of him straight away in terms of, all right, I need a forward. So I think with his average being so low, we could see him drop down. I don't know. I mean, maybe the fourth round, fourth, fifth round, you could see him. He'll be in F1, you would think, for anyone that gets him at F2. They've obviously gone very early on their F1. I'd be more than comfortable with him as my first forward.
Yeah, I would too. Look, our Patreons have been receiving my 2025 draft rankings for what you can do on the Keeper platform. I've got him in my tier 1 of forwards. I've got 6 tier 1 forwards on the Keeper platform, and he's inside that. I agree. There'll be some leagues where he just slides a little bit, and when I mean slides, I mean a round or two in contrast to the McRaes, the Horn-Francises, the Bailey Smiths. Sure, they're all going to go second, third round, if not before. But he probably will be the one that's people like, oh, that's right. He's got a 90 capacity. He's got high 85 capacity, which this year, unless we get some DPP gains, that's definitely going to probably be enough to be a top-line premium forward for us. Hey, Jordox, mate, always a pleasure talking fantasy footy with you. You've been doing double duty a lot, not just through the 50 most relevant, but also with the episodes of Finders Keepers. You've already hit the defender ranks. You've hit the midfield ranks. The next episode drops Monday. What are you doing? Are you going forwards or are you going rucks next?
Yeah, so it's rucks next. And because it's the rucks, it's a very small list of rankings. So what I've actually done, I've added a little bit extra to this episode, and I've done a deep dive on all the ruck lineups across all 18 clubs, just to give a bit of a feel for who's next in line at each club. So, a bit different, but I just thought doing the rankings only would be too small. So
yeah, it'd be a 5-minute podcast. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's out Monday.
All right, looking forward to it. We've put the description in the links of the Coaches Panel episode here for you to go and check out, but just simply search for Finders Keepers. It's right across all our social media platforms as well. Jordox is doing a brilliant job. Once he gets through ranking season, the strategy conversations with some Coaches Panel members and others from the fantasy football community start to come your way. So if you're like, I've got my rankings down, I want some more strategy stuff, don't you worry. Subscribe to the Finders Keepers podcast. Jordox has got that coming for you in 2025. 3 players left to go in my 50 most relevant. I got to be honest, if someone had said to me 12 months ago, hey, MJ, in 2025, you're going to have 3 North Melbourne players in your top 5, I would have laughed at you going, no, it's not. But the way that the variables have landed through trades and positional allocation, it means 3 of the top 5 are Kangaroos. 1 is done in Caleb Daniel. 2 remain. But which of the 2 will it be? Here's what I'll tell you. And this might just give away who's at number 2. Or does it? Is he peak price? Is there a little bit of upside? Is there some preseason noise about this guy? That maybe some things are going to change at the North Melbourne Football Club. And as good as he's been, we might just be overpaying for him if we start with him due to one change that is coming out of North Melbourne this preseason. Who am I talking about? And which Kangaroo is it? You'll find out tomorrow in the 50 Most Relevant.